The name is Nat. This week, we are looking at the correlation, or is it causation, between neurodiversity, thinking differently, and creativity. When people think, oh, I wonder what job would be great for someone who is dyslexic or autistic, I'll let them play with some crayons or something. It's just factually not correct. However, there is a grainel of truth in it, and that grainel is what we're going to expand on today. Neurodivergent people think differently. Being a creative person is a really good way to express that different way of thinking, because often there's like a mismatch between how our brains think and the way we're able to communicate. That's what we're going to be really diving in deep today. I do think it is really interesting, and your background, there's definitely room for collaboration there. Okay, let's crack on. Here's a picture of me. Oh yeah, credibility. But essentially, I'm quite a creative person. That is what we're here for. Here's a TED Talk. Woohoo! 10,000. The purpose, if we're successful, is looking at how neurodivergent thinkers are able to tap in and to harness their creativity. Are we inherently creative? I would maybe say no, but I do find the difficulties that come along with our thinking differently approach is probably what spurs on creativity at a really young age. I was drawing before I could speak. Admittedly, I didn't speak till I was 5, so I had plenty of time to learn to draw. But you do find that communication finds a way. In one word, I want you to say what creativity is. I'm curious to see this. Admittedly, if you need a couple of words, go for it. But I want to make sure that we are all on the same page, that creativity isn't just arts and craft. My definition is any way of expressing yourself, which maybe isn't the stereotypical way, which I think lines pretty amazingly with our understanding of cognitive diversity. Or Lang says learning styles, or whatever you want to call them, will always be important. It is all very well for ND communities knowing their skills and strengths, but the important bit is that the employer is aware. I agree. Mr. Lang, Tim? Oh, Tim. Very confusing, alter ego. It's been debunked now about learning styles in terms of we have a learning style. But what is true is that we definitely have a preference. It turns out that our brains aren't just wired for auditory, but because maybe there might be other blockers, we have a preference. Might sound like a subtle differences, but I think it can help inform how you learn. All right, Tim. We got creativity in one word. We've got expression, thinking outside of the box, soulful expression, new, unique, playful, development, writing, freedom, idea solution, idea generation, therapeutic, curiosity, communication. I think a lot of these are very active words. None of them are saying drawing, painting, charcoaling, or whatever form of art. They are more expression words. That's exactly what we're going to be looking at today. I must admit, one of my responses had more than one word. Do you know what, April? I'm going to let you off today. First of all, I just want to look at some well-known individuals who I would say are very creative. And I just want you to say whether you think they have ADHD, slide left, or autism, slide right. We've got Temple Grandin at the beginning. And yeah, Temple Grandin, absolutely autistic, arguably one of the most famous autistic people alive today, who I had the privilege of interviewing late last year. That was great. Here is a drawing they did. This is a very technical drawing, and it's to help bison be looked after, get seen to. And conventionally, we just had a big old long line and the bison be like, all right, you cow, move on. They got scared because they could see what's in front of them and they're like, danger. But what Temple is like, if we do a few swings and roundabouts, essentially cows or bison, they naturally seem to turn. And if they can't see what's around them, so it's always bending, they feel a lot more calm. And I get that, to be fair. It's often with animals, if they see what's around them, scary. If you cover their eyesight a bit, it's more calming. This was a much more humane way of looking after our livestock. Cows are only going right, apparently. Yeah, there is something about them. I don't understand totally why the cows like to do that, but cows be cows. My hemispheres are always confused. Ugh, I get you. I don't know any of these celebrities. Oh, Anne-Marie, I don't think you're overly missing out. But if you do not know, Temple is an animal scientist. They basically study the behavior of livestock. Richard Branson, I can see why you put that there, because everyone's, oh, he has dyslexia. He also resonates with ADHD, but I'm guessing he doesn't care as much about that because he hardly talks about it. But he is the founder of the Virgin Group, which is I think 500 different companies in total he's either founded or bought out. Stephen Wiltshire, if you have not heard of him, and I'm guessing the fact that this is in the middle, you have not, he is probably the most exceptional individual on this list. He has autism, and he is an autistic savant, which means he has exceptional abilities. He is able to draw from memory, and we will talk a bit more about that soon. Then you've got will.i.am from the Black Eyed Peas, who has ADHD and uses that hyper-focus to be productivity superhouse. Let's have a little look at these. Oh yes, as I mentioned, Temple, autism, animal scientist. Stephen, here's an image of Stephen. And long story short, he was in a helicopter, never been to London. He had a little look over the city, and after maybe a couple of hours, he went back down and he drew the entire city, and it was perfect. But as we've always talked about this spiky profile, while it must seem like, I wish I was a savant, I think careful what you wish for, because it normally means that there's a trade-off. Stephen can often struggle with hypersensitivity, elements of independent living, was selective mute for many years. You can see it does have trade-offs. Jessica McCabe, who is the host of How to ADHD. Yeah, I really love their channel. I'm always a bit jealous. I'm like, oh, how do you make the quality so good? But I do often aim to get to that kind of level. If you have ADHD, really great channel to follow. Stephen is a very rare case. Like I said, it's not that you get all these amazing skills. There's always a trade-off. And I think we are more extremists in our abilities, depending on where you are on the spectrum. If you're okay with that terminology, then most people try to be balanced. Some people are highs and lows, and then you've got others who are quite dramatic. Let's have a little look at the science now, because science is fun. What does the science actually say about the relationship between neurodivergence and creativity? I think anecdotal, I think we can all agree there's definitely a connection. We've seen it everywhere. But does the science back it up? I want you to rank yourself in these areas. For instance, are you good at spatial reasoning? Are you okay at divergent thinking? Would you consider yourself creative? What about idea generation? I'm doing this, by the way, because I'm pretty certain most people who attend these sessions are neurodivergent. What you probably will see is maybe collectively we become quite rounded, but individually you'll probably find that there are areas that you will either do a really high score or a really low score, where neurotypical will probably be a little bit more middle or kind of average. One example of an individual who I think is phenomenal, and I highly recommend you check them out, is Yaoi. They are a really great artist. They have hallucinations and OCD, and rather than avoiding that difficulty, they have gone full into it. Their entire thing is polka dots. When we say, oh, they're obsessed with it, we use that word so flippantly. She is obsessed. What is spatial reasoning and novel idea generation? Good question, Anne-Marie. Spatial reasoning is understanding your environment around you. It's kind of like when people say, oh, I think in 3D space. For instance, maybe designers or sculptures would have very good spatial reasoning. Novel idea generation is simply, can you come up with ideas that no one else has thought of before? Original thought. Divergent thinking is going a different route to the mainstream. And creativity is, as we've already established, the process of new ideas. I would say a lot of these do overlap, but they all have subtle differences. The stars do have to align. For instance, if we go back to Stephen, I don't know personally, but I would be quite surprised if he's able to have that memory all the time. I reckon when he is stressed, when he's under pressure, maybe it might start to kind of dip. For these things, you might be good. We can say writer's block because you've got to be in the flow. For some of us, if they see these abilities, they want to milk them for all they're worth, but then they realize if the environment isn't set up for success, it kind of plummets. Jess says, I love the quote Nat shared in another webinar from John Elder Robinson. Building up weakness only makes you less disabled. Building up a strength makes you the top of the world. I like that. Do you know what? We are going to be talking a little bit about John as we go on. Going to the science, Dyslexic individuals have enhanced spatial reasoning. When we say, oh, dyslexic people good at 3D thinking, that's basically what we mean. There's been studies which saying, yep, that is a thing. And they've done tests. ADHD can boost divergent thinking. It has also been proven within a reasonable study that people who have ADHD are likely to connect dots in different ways and come to ultimately different solutions. And there's also been studies focusing on the relationship between autism and novel ideas, coming up with things that no one have really joined before. A quick shout out to David Mitchell. There's a lovely author who does Cloud Atlas, and it's now a feature film. I haven't seen the film, but it's a very creative book, and they have autism. We're going to be showing lots of examples as we go along today. Let's move along to self-expression, because I really think there is something here. With most people who are neurodivergent, what is the unifying thing in terms of deficits? I would probably say it is communication barriers. For one way or another, it might be writing communication barriers. It might be actually getting the words out, such as dyspraxia. It might be not able to focus on a non-interesting thought with ADHD, or it could be with autism, going in too deep and losing your audience. Either way, as human beings, we want to express ourselves, and I find self-expression always finds a way. That is how we get some of the most amazing art from those individuals that have some sort of barrier. Great example, I think, is if you look at the Talking Heads, one of their lead singers, David Byrne.
I'd say Byrne.
Byrne, thanks, April.
Yes, I was a Tottenham the postman, because of autism surname, or maybe other people who have that surname until I heard it on them, I think, the radio one.
Yeah. Okay, I appreciate you calling me out, April. Always there for me. He is a really interesting individual, has autism, and the music isn't just music. It's almost like their way of communicating. They are also a really fantastic dancer, not in the conventional sense, but in the kind of, I'm going to do whatever I want. And you really feel their passion. I would recommend checking out their dance moves. I see it as an artistic stimming. Essentially, stimming is their dancing. But I want to put it out to all of you. How do you personally express yourself? We've got sketching, and a great example is
Jean-Michel Basquiat,
who is a phenomenal graffiti artist, I suppose you could say, who absolutely thrives in chaos. It's taking these complex thoughts and getting them down onto paper. You've got forms of movement. And for this example, we've got Misty Copeland, who is a ballet and a trailblazer in the sport. We've got Agatha Christie, who some people say dyslexia, some would say dysgraphia. I think more dysgraphia, but they would often have other people write down their dictations before Dragon and other software existed. Lastly, Billie Eilish, who, due to Tourette's, they would often struggle with certain words. They would kind of mold their language around these pillars in order to get the words out. It created a very unique and interesting sound. Oh, LaDonna, express yourself with your mouth. I don't want to ask any more questions on that. Nice. I think it's really interesting. Oh, okay. Daniel says, I translate neurobilingual over complexity into neurotypical, less dimensional language patterns. That's my way of creative output. Yeah, I like that. I would say, can I make things more palatable and easier for others to understand? We all need a Google Translator in our life, and currently there isn't a neurotypical translator. As we did say with Stephen, it's not all brilliance. There are challenges, and I want to understand, what are your barriers when it comes to creativity? In an ideal world, we would always find a way of expressing ourselves in a way that is authentic to us. But let's face it, that's not always how it is. Any limitations, either personal or societal. I just want to pinpoint this lovely illustration from Jessica Park, who suffers a lot with social isolation and has struggled with employment their entire life. Yet their artwork is beautiful. Their color palette reminds me of Wes Anderson. A barrier we have is fatigue and concentration, hyper-focus disruption. I'm just not creative. Oh, I believe you are, but it's maybe finding the right creativity for you. As I always say, even people in finance are creative, just sometimes not in the most ethical way. Confidence, finding motivation to edit personal YouTube videos. Yeah, I get that. Exhausted from office work. We got fatigue, block out, mind blocking, pain, which unfortunately is a co-occurrence. Lack of money for supplies. self-esteem, I feel severe. Here, we know that ND people can express themselves, but we also know that there are still barriers to that expression. If we are not able to express ourselves, either verbally, through dancing, drawing, whatever floats your boat, that does lead to depression, and that can make us feel quite low. Essentially, being human is being able to communicate with one another. No matter how you do that, it is important to have that outlet. Daniel says, defining creativity by means of capitalist usage, thus output, limits the realms of acceptable creativity. You do find that's why people from, say, lower economic areas might go to, say, graffiti. Not because they're like rebels who just hate the world, but because we all need a way of expressing ourselves, and you use the mediums that you have available to you. I'm sure a lot of us would be doing marble statues if we could afford a marble, but we can't, so we have to improvise. LaDonna says, I freeze under pressure. If people give me instructions, I take too literal and my sense of creativity goes away. My autism made me think of the longest time that creativity only comes in the form of art. It's an interesting point, and I think that's one of the reasons why postmodernism art, Cubanism, more abstract art came about. People were expecting you to draw in a certain way, and for some people that no longer connected with them, so they had to diverge. Your creativity may be ahead of the times, and we just haven't reached that point where people accept it as art. Some challenges which come up time and time again is fear of judgment. Don't get me wrong, I'd probably love to do a bit of ballet in my stimming. I don't want to. Fun fact though, I did tap dancing for 7 years and hated it. If you force someone to be creative, it doesn't work. Then you've got informational overload when there is just too much pressure. If you are boxed in, for instance, oh, you've done a good drawing today, could you do another drawing tomorrow? Suddenly there's that pressure on you. Sometimes you don't want to be recognized for the benefit. Then we've also got lack of time. Let's face it, communicating in ways which are more than just speaking do take additional time. These are luxuries that not all of us can do. There's no lie that the stereotype of the struggling artist is very real. I also would just like to highlight a comment that Jess says in the chat, which I think is honestly spot on. And it says, it seems that creative expression is seen as a hobby rather than simply part of being human. I think that is so true. When we cut fundings to the arts, sometimes people see that as an expendable element and that, oh, it's a nice to have and not a necessity. When we look at it as an integral part of being human and the need to express ourselves, then you realize it's not a luxury that we can take away. If we take away from it, people feel boxed in. We lose, I think, the thing that makes us human, just a little bit. LaDonna says, yeah, hence the idea that creativity has to be beneficial to capitalism to be valid to the masses. When you look at modern art, I'm sure we've all been in the Tate Modern or some museum and I could have done that. But I think we missed the point, is that it's a form of expression and it's about telling their narrative. And sometimes it's not a matter about how easy or difficult it is, because I think that kind of feeds into the capitalism narrative. Is more about, has that message been said that way before? Sometimes just looking at a canvas that is completely blue. I remember going with my mum and she's like, I could have done that and got 1 million, but you didn't. They did. Art shouldn't be seen as a mere object that we should be either impressed or unimpressed with, but more, what does it emote from us? Sometimes when I listen to music, I'm able to come up with feelings and emotions I haven't quite been able to place in my own words before. The same can be said with dance or art. I do think while neurodivergent people do tend to be quite creative individuals, you could also reverse it and say creativity is quite essential for neurodivergent people, because without it, we lose an ability to communicate with the world in another level. Or maybe that is just one view. Talking a bit about that from your own views, I would love to know, how do you get ideas across? I use my voice quite a lot because I'm horrifically dyslexic and I can't get my ideas onto paper, so I had to find alternative ways. Or maybe draw cartoons. This could be anything. It could be an analytical approach, it doesn't have to be a creative approach. How do you capture ideas? We've got poetry. I think poetry is a beautiful way. Notebooks, I talk or write, I draw pictures. I use a lot of flowery language, a lot of analogies. a lot of metaphors, and I appreciate they're not the most autism friendly, some would say, but for me, I find they paint a picture in a much stronger way than my vocabulary could ever do. We got abstract, notable recordings, poetry, drawing. So yeah, a lot of things here. I think we can do better though. Does anyone have any more novel ideas of getting their ideas caught? I don't know, maybe a dictaphone, maybe voice recordings, maybe they use shorthand, maybe use hieroglyphics. Essentially, the possibilities are absolutely endless. AI summarizer, I think that's a very new one and I use a lot. Emergent dialogues. Maybe some of you have English as a second language and you capture ideas using your native language. We don't all think in the same language. But these are really interesting. Oh, okay. I briefly mentioned Jean before. Jean is a really fantastic visual storyteller, and they are essentially the original Banksy, but we actually knew who they were. They would communicate using symbolic language, and essentially whatever their mental health or emotions were, they would display it in visual art. And often it would have very political themes, but it wouldn't spell it out for you. It would encourage the audience to use a bit of their own initiative. And yes, they had ADHD, and that did give them that kind of hyper-focused mood. In the evenings is when they'd be most active. Again, rather than fighting the ADHD, they worked with the ADHD. We're seeing here that maybe they are not creative because they are neurodivergent, but because they are neurodivergent, they need to be creative in order to communicate. Multiple projects, he would be working on multiple things at one time, always swapping around, which someone always tells us never to do. Finish the project you started before you start a new one. Maybe that isn't always the best approach. This is where I'm going to expect complete chaos, by the way. I want you to actually use your little drawing device here, if you know how to, and draw an image in the style of Jean. Again, his drawings are more about hard lines. It's broad. Essentially, you're painting the anger. When you think of, say, the political climate right now, when I look at the state of our world, I get angry. Get that anger and put it on the paper. This is why you could, for instance, just scribble on the page and it could be considered art, because it's about the message it's communicating opposed to the skill or the talent that the scribble actually had. Okay. Oh, very nice, April. Just a lot of anger. Again, I think I'm going to need a thicker brush because there is a lot of pent-up frustration with the world right now. Okay, brilliant. Then we're going to do a similar exercise, but with Stephen. While he is very good at what he does, again, he's not drawing, I would argue, because it's a hobby. I think he draws because it's his way of communicating. He has a particular memory where he can remember what he sees in minute detail. However, he finds life overstimulating, so he will always do it with headphones. I want to see how good you are at eidetic memory. I want you to draw London from memory. I'm going to draw Big Ben, and I'm pretty certain this is exactly how it looks. Nice London eye there. Oh, Ladonna, very good. Perfection. What other buildings do we have? Oh yeah, we have the Shard, which is just ridiculously tall and pointy. I'd hate to fall on that. Yeah, I'd say this is pretty much London. That's how I remember it anyway. We get some water. To be fair, I'm pretty sure there's crocodiles in the Thames. Another great case example is, as we said, David Byrne. Yeah, he uses music as a social language, which I think is really fascinating. How do you connect with people around you? A lot of these things that we have witnessed have been self-expression. How do I get what I want to say out to the rest of the world? But David would say, I use it to communicate collectively with people. His dancing is very unstructured, very unpredictable. Like I said, I do see it as a form of stimming that other people can join along with. But in many ways, it's like saying, hey, neurotypical people, I want you to communicate my way now, rather than having to always translate for you. These individuals all have something in common. It's having a growth mindset. I want to know, do you think you have one or do you not? If you're not sure what a growth mindset is, can you turn a negative or something which is a barrier or a disadvantage into something which can have growth and something beautiful can come out of it? All of these individuals we've shown are not talented, just because. They are talented because they have had to work a muscle that other people have not worked as heavily, normally because they haven't been able to communicate in a more conventional way. Florence, for example, had a lot of setbacks, suffering from OCD, experiencing dyspraxia and ADHD, and they have used it to expand and to grow. Oh, LaDonna says, I stim like this too, but I'm a better dancer. Nice. I was terrible at dancing, honestly. I would just be tapping all around the place. I didn't care where I was tapping. On these, do you know of any of these individuals who have growth mindsets? Example, Heston has ADHD and would often experiment with science and would always be trying new novel things that no one has ever done before. Anthony Hopkins has autism, would often struggle with social connections, so became an actor in order to artificially create these connections and use it as a tool to communicate. Daniel Tammet is an autistic savant who ridiculously good at mathematics, and again, used a perceived deficit and turned it into something that bared fruit. As Jess mentioned earlier, John Elder Robinson, who is an author and neurodiversity advocate, also were able to turn lemons into lemonade. Anthony Hopkins took masking to a professional level. That is spot on. Peter's bestseller did the same, played Bond at parties instead of being himself. That is very cool. In a mindset, we've got hyper-focus and innovation, deep focus and acting mastery, insightful savant, and neurodiversity advocate. Again, just to really hit home the point, being neurodivergent doesn't make you creative, but it does give you a justification or a necessity to find an alternative approach. Some quick takeaways. Neurodivergence does have strengths, but those strengths come from a need of communication and connecting with the world around us. And whether or not we become a drawer, a musician, a pamphlet maker, I think normally depends on what's around us and what's at our disposal. But what kind of follows us through, regardless, is the need to connect with one another. People used to say autistic people were solo individuals that didn't like others. I would say that's completely not true. I think autistic people need communication and community as much as anyone else, but the way they do it is often irregular to the status quo. As always, if any of you do resonate with being neurodivergent and you find that your way of communicating with the world doesn't align with how things currently are, then an assessment with recommendations could be beneficial to you. Do check out on our website. Any last questions or comments? April says, I enjoyed watching Heston's programs when he made creative feasts based on different historical periods. Oh, nice. Yeah, you love a bit of bacon, April. Rodrigo says, the neurodiversity is to find our own way to communicate. That is my takeaway from it, Rodrigo. That explains Peter Sellers bringing in the original Casino Royale. Nice. I love this time very much. Oh, thanks, Daniel. I appreciate it. Again, we do these webinars every week, and they're just a really fun, creative way of learning more about our brains and learning from each other. Freezing is a hell of a problem, Nat. Do a talk on freezing, autistic ADHD and paralysis. All right, Leo, I think I could do that. Because believe it or not, I still get anxiety for doing talks. When I did my TED talk, oh my God, the anxiety was crippling. I think we could definitely do one on that. LaDonna says, I freeze under pressure if people give me instructions. My autism made me think of the longest time. Yeah, okay, you got me hooked. Thank you so much. If you do want to watch this one later, it is going to be on our YouTube once we have edited and uploaded it. If you do want to connect, by all means, here's a QR code if you want to add me on LinkedIn. We are absolutely done, which is amazing. Thank you all. Really appreciate it. All right, lovely stuff. I'm going to let you all go on your merry way now, but do enjoy the rest of your week and make sure you get creative in however that looks for you. Bye all.